So, who keeps the dog on divorce and separation? This is a short film which will give you the answers to that question. Hello, my name is Peter Reynolds. I'm a partner at Rowberry Morris solicitors. We're over the Thames Valley and West London, and I've been dedicated to family law for over 20 years. One thing that comes up quite often is what happens to pets on separation or divorce. And as a dog-loving nation, it's perhaps surprising that pets are property and not akin to how we deal with children on custody matters. One common problem, whether parties are married or not, is ownership of dogs being proved by who paid for the dog, when quite often it's paid for by a joint account, or one party's paid for one vet bill and the other's paid for the other, and it's very much a joint entity, and that makes it very difficult for a judge. And that's why having a prenuptial or postnuptial agreement makes a real difference. And even if you have no other assets, you can have effectively a pup nuptial just about the dog itself or the cat, or this applies to all animals. One particular issue for married parties who have pets, particularly dogs, is that the court will not deal with it as a discrete point at an early hearing. It will be heard only at the end, and that can take a year. And by that time, the circumstances for that pet will have changed. So the spouse who leaves with the pet or takes the pet will have a big advantage over who keeps the pet at the end of the day. So it is really important that there's an early agreement, or there's a pre or post-nuptial agreement on the pet. One problem that I've come across, sadly, is that because it's a property owning dispute at the outset, one spouse can take the dog away and sell the dog, dispose of the dog, before the matter comes to court. So the court will have no discretion on it at all, because the asset, the dog, the pet, will no longer be there. So it is really important that the safeguarding measures are taken at an early stage. On the issue of safeguarding the dog, I had a case in which a dog was taken by one spouse and there was a threat to sell it, and the other side made an application, rather desperate application, for an injunction to safeguard the dog from being sold. Now, the application could only be made as trying to stop the sale of an asset, and so rather desperately they increased the value of the alleged asset by saying the dog could get pregnant and could have pups of a value. That application itself was unsuccessful, and it does depend very much on having a valuable dog, and my dog, as you can see, is a mutt of no financial value, although he means the world to me. In the case of unmarried parties, the law is very clear and it is fairly stark. It depends entirely upon ownership, so the welfare of the animal is irrelevant, and who in fact cares for the animal, who the animal is closest to. These are non-relevant considerations. So it is critical that you either have an agreement, you have a cohabitation agreement, or an agreement simply in relation to the pet. The court will look at who bought the pet, who had paid the pet bills, who the pet is registered to, but they won't look at other emotional issues such as who's most attached to the pet and who walks the pet. So it is really important, if you have a dog and you want to ensure that the dog remains living with you post-separation, that you have a cohabitation agreement that is clear. With parties that are not married, one particular problem arises when the dog has been bought from a joint account, or vet bills have been paid together, or even the dog's been registered in both names. And that makes it very difficult to determine who gets the dog, and an application through the court is very expensive. Ultimately, it's determined as to who the judge believes owns the dog, and compensation will need to be paid to the other. But it is a very difficult and very messy arrangement, and it's much better to get these things sorted before a dispute arises. There sometimes isn't a right answer as to who keeps the dog on separation or divorce, because both parties love their dog. What sometimes is used as a compromise, it's not really a legal route, but it can be incorporated into any agreement, and then it would be binding, is that the dog goes with the children, and if there are children, and the dog then can move between the houses when the children move between the houses, and that is a compromise, but that's not something that the court would order of its own motion.